Welcome to this results panel from our main Highland League Weekly show that's over on the Press and Journal website. Just a reminder, if you'd like two highlights games to watch, as well as all the bloopers from Highland League Weekly in 2024, given this is the last show of the year, you can find those over on the P&J website, but you need to be a subscriber to view them. Good news, you can view them at the moment for the low price of just £1 for your first 3 months. But if you would just like discussion of all of Saturday's Breedon Highland League games, and there were a few that took place over the weekend, you're in the right place. We're starting with our main game, which was Turriff United 1, Keith 0. Callum, a game here, entertaining, but Turriff United's slight better attacking threat making the difference.
I think over the piece, I do think there's a lot between the teams. I mean, goal difference separated them in the table at kick-off, and it was pretty even, and there's not a lot between them. But I think over the 90 minutes, Turriff just had that wee bit more sort of attacking prowess and always looked that sort of wee bit more threatening. It's like, as Craig Ewan touched upon, like Keith sort of, other than a couple of occasions when they did get into the final third, the cross or the pass or even the shot seemed to let them down, and even and it doesn't maybe quite come across in the highlights so much, but in the last 20 minutes Keith had a lot of pressure in that game, and they put a lot of the open play and set pieces, put a lot of balls into Turriff's box, but just delivery, you know, that sort of quality delivery was just, in that bit of quality you maybe need to score the goal, just wasn't quite there for whatever reason. Balls maybe too many deliveries, maybe gone straight through to Lee Herbert or behind everyone or hitting the first man, just wee things like that. And where, although in fairness it did have a couple of decent chances, Cammy Wilson's unlucky with the one in the second half. Kieran Yates makes a good block when, whether it was on target, whether Lee Herbert saved it, he maybe would have, but it was a good block. And Mike Ironside's volley was a decent chance as well, but just felt Turriff had that wee bit more, like Colin Gray's one early on, Mackenzie tailored a couple in the first half, Lucas Smith header at Ryan Spink cleared. There was always just that sort of threat for maybe extra wee bit of quality for Turriff, and for seeing him as well for the first time in the flesh, Mackenzie Taylor I thought was probably the best player on the pitch. I thought he was excellent. He was a real nuisance to the Keith back four throughout. You could see he's physically well built, and he holds the ball up really well and brings in Rhys McEwen or Colin Gray, Murray Cormack, brings those players into the game, and he's set up the goal, decent ball across. And although he'd probably like to have scored more goals, and particularly with a couple of chances that he had, I do think the goals will come for him, and I think he should be pleased with his all-round game, because I thought he was very good.
Turriff had a bit of a sticky patch earlier in the season, but they're now on a 7-year best run, 6 games.
Six games, five wins and a draw in all competitions, which is, you know, moved them up a league a good bit, and also taken them into the semi-final of the Morrison Motors Turriff Aberdeenshire Shield. And for the last time they went on a run like that, you have to go back, it was between the 1st of April 2017 and the 19th of August 2017, the 8 matches undefeated, sort of straddling the 2 seasons, and that's, you know, 7.5 years ago, back when Ross Jark was the manager. So it just shows, like, you know, sort of the progress they've made recently, and that they have sort of turned that corner, brought in a couple of players, got a couple of players back for injury. And I think when they were on that bad run, we all knew that it wasn't necessarily a true reflection of where, you know, what Turriff had at their disposal and where they are as a club. And I think we're seeing that now. And it's interesting when you're speaking, whether it's to Warren Cummins or any of the players, and that sort of really tough run that they had really seems to have fired them up now, and that sort of mentality, we don't want to experience anything like that again.
Yeah, Keith, they had a different face in goals at the weekend. Rodrigo Vitals on an emergency loan from Aberdeen. What's the situation with that?
Well, Craig Reid's just unavailable for a couple of weeks, and again, he's obviously a familiar face, and Keith number 1, he's just unavailable for, I think, this Saturday's game, and I think the Keith's next game as well, and Craig Ewan's managed to get Rodrigo in from Aberdeen for these couple of games, and pretty good player to bring in. I mean, he's I've seen him a few times in like Aberdeenshire Cup ties and Shield ties and things, but I thought, as Craig sort of said as well in his interview, he was very good, didn't really put a foot wrong over the course of the 90 minutes, no chance of the goal, and kind of handy for Keith that they're able to bring in somebody like that as cover for the time being.
Yep. Okay, then let's move on to game 2 from Saturday then, which was Rothes against Nairn County, and this is another entertaining match. Okay, another game then where the team that had the slightly better attacking performance won it 4-1 in the end. I thought all the finishes though in the game were quite composed, quite classy.
Aye, I mean it was, I thought it was a really good game in terms of both teams going for it and a lot of chances created, and it's that thing about goals change games, and if you take your chances you'll do well, and Nairn were ultimately the better of that. I did feel like they created a bit more over the piece as well. Their front four of Andre Gregg, Matthew Wright, Ben Kelly, Ben Barron, you'd always expect them to create chances and to score goals, and that's what happened. But I think Rothes, to be fair, played their part and created their fair share of chances as well, and their goal was a really good finish actually for Thomas Brady. But I just think, fair Rothes' point of view there, it was probably too easy for Nairn to create chances and a wee bit too easy for them to score the goals they did. And if you look at sort of the defensive side of the game, Rothes, I think they've conceded 70 goals in their 19 league games. That's the most any team in the league, and that's where the sort of issue lies, because we saw in that game, and we've seen in other games they can pose a threat going forward, but it's just trying to cut down on the goals they're conceding is a big thing. Nairn, I think they'll hope now maybe that can be the start of a sort of more consistent run of form, because it has been sort of up and down at times for them. But again, similar to what I'm saying about Rothes, like for Nairn, it probably has been the defensive side of the game that's been the issue this season. Like with the players have got the top end, they'll always create chances and score goals, but it's just being maybe that, as Ross Tokley said it a few times, being maybe that wee bit more streetwise and seeing things out in that side of the game. But they've signed Miller Gamble from Brora on Friday, and he can maybe help them defensively. I mean, he's somebody he's done well at Brora the 4 years he's been there without maybe ever quite fully sort of establishing himself as a regular and playing quite as much as he would have liked. But that's, there's no disgrace in that, because very high standard of squad and player at Brora. But I think for Nairn, Miller Gamble's a good player to be able to sign, and even though he's only 22, good experience at the level, and he can maybe be that sort of difference maker for them defensively. I
think a great last name as well. I liked him calling him the Gambler on Twitter where they signed him. Okay then, should we move on then to the other games from the weekend? Okay, we'll start with Huntly 1, Brechin City 5. Dale Robertson and Ewan Loudon scored quickfire first half goals for Brechin. Angus Grant then pulled a goal back, his 25th of the season for Huntly. Early in the second half though, Fraser McLeod netting and Dale Robertson finishing off his hat-trick with another 2 goals either side of a saved Angus Grant penalty. Grant won that when Scott Bright pulled him down. How many goals is that now for Dale Robertson? Do we know, Callum?
Dale Robertson's got 20, and he's second top scorer all competitions behind Angus Grant, and Ewan Loudon's got 13 as well, so he may be a wee bit more under the radar, but he's having a very good season.
Are we thinking those two will be our Golden Boot favourites at this halfway-ish?
Right now, they kind of have to be, because they're a wee bit clear everyone else, and like Jordan McRae had a very good start, but he's obviously been injured and things, which has kind of halted his progress. So right now, in terms of Golden Boot, they certainly it looks like it'll be one of those two at the minute, but long way to go. But in terms of this, seems like all the games on Saturday had plenty of chances, because this is another one where I mean, Colin Charlesworth said it afterwards at 5-1. The bare result sounds horrible from a Huntly perspective, but they actually, on another day, Huntly could have scored at least 3 or 4, if not more. I mean, the penalty Angus Grant had saved, he's also hit the post with a free kick and had 2 or 3 other good chances that he would probably expect himself to put away. So I think, again, talking about defensively, I think for Huntly, that whoever they play, you'd always fancy them to create chances and score goals more often than not, but they were just not really ruthless enough on Saturday with the chances they did get. Whereas you contrast that, and I think that's something Brechin are very good at, is that they probably, in terms of all the teams in the league, probably up there in terms of putting away the highest percentage of their chances. They, when they get into good areas, they usually make it count. And they're also, and generally, although they gave up quite a few chances on Saturday, generally they're also usually pretty sturdy defensively, which is a good mix. But I think overall for Brechin, you'd have to be hugely satisfied with that, because on paper I think it looked a bit of a sort of tricky game. Huntly have had a good sort of season up to this point, and to win it in the manner they did is hugely impressive.
Second place Pro Rangers, all they can do is keep pace. They did that at the weekend, 5-0 win over Lossy. All the goals in the second half, though. Tom Kelly, Tony Dingwall scoring direct from a corner. Must have been a windy day. Craig McKenzie.
And I think it actually was
it?
that
No.
windy. Yeah.
Craig McKenzie, Connor Bunce. Sounded like it was a man-the-match performance from him, and scoring again for his new club he recently signed for. Andrew McLeod got Brora's final goal, a penalty after Wallace Duffy, the debutant, was fouled. I mean, great for Brora. What they need to do, not a game loss you would expect to win, but it is another defeat for them.
Aye. What I was saying about Brechin being hugely impressive, I would say basically the same about Brora. Certainly the second half performance, once they got that opening goal, they kicked on in really good style and won impressively and played that sort of exciting, free-flowing football that Abdi Ken's Brora can play, and that was on display. And I mean, I feel like you mentioned the goal for a corner. I feel like there's been quite a lot of that this season. It feels like every week just now we're speaking about that. That was great, but I think the goal of the game was probably the fourth for Connor Bunce. Hopefully I'll be able to show you it on screen just now, a tremendous finish. And it's just, Brora, I think they're still there's top scorers in the league, and we've seen all season they carry threats for a lot of different positions, and even the likes of Tom Kelly, maybe not the most regular goal scorer, but he's popped up and made the breakthrough, and they're a team that loves to attack Brora, and they're very dangerous. For Lossy, they need to, as you say, that like their season's not going to be defined by games against Brora clearly, but they need to sort of find a way to dig out a win or two or pick up a few points here and there, because it's a pretty sort of grim run they've been on, having won since the 21st of September. And I think Steve Porter, the manager, probably take positives and negatives from Saturday. I think first half they limited Brora to not a huge amount in terms of, there was a couple of openings, but they did well and kept themselves in the game for that 55 minutes. But then once the first goal went in, they've ended up being well beaten in the end, which is the negative for him, because when you're sort of down towards the bottom, you need that you kind of, I'm not saying they folded, but you kind of just sort of get swept aside. You need to try and battle your way to pick up points here and there. Well, I should say actually as well, with Lossy, talking about trying to sort of turn things around, they made another signing, Matthew Nichol, I believe, is a sort of midfielder, could maybe play defence as well. Brought in for Isla Vale. He wasn't involved on Saturday, but he's, Steve Porter has sort of been trying to put his own stamp on things, brought in the likes of him and Sean Cameron and Ryan Matheson, a few different players, so they'll hope maybe that sort of injection of fresh blood can help spark things, because it's it feels at the moment anyway, Lossy like they're needing something just to go for them, and maybe Matthew Nicol can make a difference for them. And it's another sort of player who's done well in the juniors and has been talked about a wee bit, and he's getting that chance to step up, and we'll see how he gets on at Lossy.
Okay, well, let's move on to the team that's in third place in the league. Banks of D drew 0-0 at Inverurie Locos on Saturday. Now, this game, interesting, less for the sort of like the goalmouth action, more for the controversy. So Callum Dingwall wasn't sent off for a challenge in the opening period that was described as disgraceful by
Paul Lawson.
Banks of D co-manager Paul Lawson. Filippo Mazzoni, the referee, he then dished out 2 bookings to Ian Vigers. So Banks of D themselves went down to 10 men. D then had a penalty given against them later in the game for handball, which Dingwall took, which was almost the ultimate controversy because the player that survives then could have scored the penalty. However, Daniel Hoban saved it. Have you seen any of the
I have.
controversy?
I think with the Callum Dingwall one, personally, when we should be able to show it, watching it, I could see why he was only booked by the referee, Filippo Mazzoni. There's maybe the question of how he lunges in the force, but I don't think it's studs up, and it is a sort of genuine attempt to play the ball. Like, I can see, and I think emotions perhaps were running high after the game, and I can see where Paul Lawson's coming from, but I didn't think it was as bad as a lot of challenges that you'll maybe see where players do get sent off. Like, I think a booking, I could understand the referee's decision with that one. With the 2 yellow cards for Ian Vigers, the second one is quite soft, and I can see why Banks of D are unhappy with that. However, again, on the other side, I do think the first one is needless. He's sort of tussling with Mark Suter at a free kick, and sort of gives him a wee sort of dig or whatever in the stomach. And if he hadn't been seen, obviously he'd be fine, but the linesman's seen it and he's been booked for that. And for a player as good as Ian Vigers is, and with the experience he's got, as much as you can argue about the second one, the first one was pretty needless. Like, he didn't need to do that and get booked. And then, but at the same time, I think with the second one, if a referee just gives a foul, don't think there would be any great complaints about calling for a booking. But that's just what can happen, is it? It's referees have to make decisions, and Filippo Mazzoni's made them as he saw fit on Saturday. I mean, the funny thing with all that is that as much as you maybe look at the score and go on 0-0, Banks of D sort of fallen two points further behind Brechin and Brora. I actually think, given that Daniel Hoban saved a penalty in the first half and they played 50 minutes with 10 men, you'd say really it was a good point. And Ken and Inverurie are doing well this season as well, and I'm sure they would have fancied especially once it went down to 10, they would have fancied winning it. So I do think overall for Banks of D, it's not a bad result really, given the circumstances. For Locos, I think again Dean Donaldson's very happy with the performance overall, and it's another game against one of the teams at the top end of the table where they've competed really well, so they'll be pleased with that. But it's just maybe they're still searching a wee bit in Inverurie for that sort of ruthlessness in the last third to maybe can put the chances away when you're on top in games like this, because you've seen, like, this season and previous seasons with the teams at the very top end and those sort of tight games, they generally have somebody at the top end of the pitch that'll make a difference.
Yeah. Tussling for the best of the rest with Locos are Clattenacudden, and they lost. This sounded like a belter, this game. Fraserburgh 3, Clattenacudden 2 at Bellslie. Ended up being a close run thing, but Fraserburgh were 2-0 up in the game deep in the second half. Marley Sweeney Road put them ahead pretty early on. He seems a good prospect for Fraserburgh. Marley, they were then frustrated by Logan Ross in the Clark goal before he went off with a pre-half-time head injury. Paul Young netted Fraserburgh's second with 18 minutes left. That could have been all she wrote, but James Anderson scored a quick-fire double of his own. He had Clark back to level back level at 2-2 with 5 or so minutes left, but then just when it looked like Clark might potentially come all the way back and win the game, Jamie Beagrie scored from a Scott Barber cross, wasn't it, to win the game for the home side. I mean, it's one of those things for Fraserburgh, it's a double-edged sword of like, you're frustrated to almost chuck it away, but it's admirable character to, once it goes to 2-2, to still dig out the win.
I think both teams showed a lot of character, actually. I was going to say quickly, you're mentioning Marley Sweeney-Rowe being a good prospect for Fraserburgh. I think, from what I've seen of him, be a good prospect for his parent club, Dundee, going forward. He looks like he's got a bright future ahead of him, and for a sort of defender, he's popped up with a fair few goals as well. Good header on Saturday.
What's the link there? Do you know?
It was just when Fraserburgh went through that sort of period where they were short of numbers with injuries and things like that, they were sort of looking at a few different options for getting players on loan, and they ended up coming up with him. I believe he potentially I think they'd potentially seen him playing for Dundee's reserves or under 18s in a couple of games, which was maybe how they sort of got to know about him. But he's done very well for them. But in terms of the character, I think the way sort of game, I mean, roller coaster of a game, but for like the first half, I thought Fraserburgh were, from what I've seen, highlights and things, Fraserburgh were very good, probably should have been more than one up. And even in the second half, they still seemed reasonably comfortable, and Paul Young put them 2 up with 20 odd minutes to go. And then after that, give Clark credit, because in the past, maybe that kind of would have been it for Clark, but they showed character and they had a real go at Fraserburgh after that, and it was sort of nothing to lose. And you know, they were on top, got their 2 goals, and at that point you would have fancied them. If anybody was going to go on to win it, you would have fancied it would have been them. But then Fraserburgh have that sort of never say die attitude about them, and I mean, Scott Barber, I thought did really well with his run and cross for the winner, and it was a pretty simple task for Jamie Beagrie, but it was kind of one of them. I think even if we show you it on screen, I don't necessarily think the ball Scott Barber was even a pass. I think it was just a sort of clearance for Brian Hayne. He sort of made that into a good pass and set up a goal from it. And I think for Fraserburgh, Mark Cowie, he's still like seeing things they could probably brush up on, and they could be sharper in certain areas. But you look at this run they're on, they've not lost. Okay, there's some draws in there, but they've not lost since the 21st of September. And they've shown it again on Saturday on their day. They're still a very capable team and a very good team. And they've added to on about players as well. They've added to their squad as well, with Fraser Markey coming in on loan from Aberdeen, and he's local guy to Fraserburgh, striker, and seems like they feel he could make a big impression as well in his sort of first steps in men's football. Yeah.
Okay, then one more game to discuss from Saturday that actually went ahead. It was Wick Academy 0, Buckie Thistle 3. Joe McCabe with a double in this one, and a Liam Harvey goal. Buckie seem to be motoring a bit now. Joe McCabe's second though. I feel like we've had Joe McCabe goals like this on the programme before. Sound like a bit of a cross that's maybe found the net. But have you put in a dangerous area?
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like that, but Joe's maybe could come on and sort of tell us that he's the master at catching goalkeepers out with those loopy crosses. But good for Buckie to have him back. He's been suspended and injured, and he's obviously come up trumps on Saturday. I think Buckie unbeaten in their last 4 games, 2 wins and 2 draws. And what I would say, aside for the bare results, is they've had 4 very good and differing conditions and things as well. Like the Huntly game last week was obviously a horrendous day, but they've had 4 very strong performances in not all 4 of those games, and they've sort of maybe refound a wee bit of what was missing at points earlier in the season, and they're back up, I think, into 6th in the table now, and you know, it's below the sort of top 2. It's very congested, and you know, you on current form you couldn't discount Buckie for, you know, pushing their way up towards like 4th or maybe even 3rd. They're only 6 points behind Banks of Dee, so I think Lewis McKinnon will be very pleased with what he's getting at the moment from his players. For Wick, they were missing quite a few players, but it's just, again, it's sort of run of form they're on. It seems to be quite hard to snap out of, and I think Gary Manson probably getting a bit frustrated. It feels like he's probably saying the same thing most weeks, whereas there's a lot of games, I think it's seven without a win, and there's been a lot of games where they've been they've been competitive, they haven't really been blown away, but they're coming out with nothing to show for it, and it's probably I mean, you'll maybe say they didn't score enough goals, but probably defensively it's where they're having more issues, because I don't think they've kept a clean sheet since August, which if you're having to score 2 and 3 to win games, it's obviously that bit more challenging. So I suppose probably concerns a wee bit for Wick and that side of things, but at the same time, with the players they do have at their disposal, I still sort of feel they can sort of come good at any moment, and sort of we saw even last season, the second half of the campaign, they put a sort of really good run of form together the last 10-12 games, so they'll be hoping for similar.
I mean, they might need to do it though when you look at the table. I mean, they're the sort of last team that you're looking at and thinking, or the highest placed team you're looking at thinking they could still get drawn into that sort of
well, they're in it.
battle.
They're in it just now, because I mean it's just 4 points separating the bottom 4, but by the same token, it wouldn't surprise me if the Scottish picked up 2 or 3 wins in succession and pulled themselves away from it a bit.
Forest Mechanics for Martin United was also meant to take place on Saturday, but match referee Scott Donohoe postponed it on his arrival. Was he? Yeah, it must have been reasonably late.
I think it was after his arrival. I think it was there was a bit of haggling about trying to get it on, and both teams were wanting it on. And I mean, that's 2 weeks running for Scott Donohoe, where he'd Keith Rothus last week was after 2 o'clock postponement, and Forest for Martin the same again on Saturday. And
Just can't be bothered.
Well, people haven't been making that joke, but I've been told, I haven't seen pictorial evidence, but I've been told that the pitch at Mossett Park was in better condition than it was last week when Forest played out that thrilling draw with Strathspey. So I think both teams, but the Cancans in particular, were a bit sick about the decision, but obviously the referee has a call on these things, and in fairness, it sounds like, whether you agree or disagree, I think Scott probably has been consistent both weeks in his sort of judgment. However, I also can't escape the feeling that when you speak to certain people, there is a feeling that if that game on Saturday or the game last Saturday had needed to be played, that it would have been played, which doesn't really sit particularly well when there needs to be consistency. However, it's not an easy job, and the referee has the say, but certainly in both instances, Saturday and the previous week, the clubs involved have felt the pitch was playable and have been keen to play, but the game hasn't gone ahead.
Okay then, well, let's have a look then at the latest Breedon Highland League standings as we enter 2025. That's it then for the final Highland League Weekly results panel here on YouTube for 2024. Just a reminder, if you would like to watch 2 highlights matches from the final card of the year, as well as all of our best bloopers from Highland League Weekly in 2024, you can do that over on the Press and Journal website with our main show. You need to be a subscriber to do that, but you can subscribe at the moment via our Sport Pack for just £1 for your first 3 months. We'll be back next week on YouTube with discussion of all of the latest Highland League results for this coming weekend. In the meantime, you can keep up to date with everything Highland League and Highland League Weekly from the Press and Journal via a few means. You can sign up to our various social media channels, follow us there. You can also get yourself on our mailing list for the Press and Journal's Highland League newsletter. There's a link to sign up for that below this video. But yes, until we see you next, have a good Hogmanay. Enjoy football, whichever games you're watching.